A woman ended a relationship and took legal steps to protect herself. Court documents were filed. A restraining order was granted. To those around her, it appeared the situation was under control. But behind the paperwork, a pattern was quietly forming. Missed warnings, unresolved threats, and a history that did not stay in the past. Months earlier, property had been damaged, accusations were made, and the lines between personal conflict and criminal behavior blurred. Friends noticed unusual activity. Family members raised concerns. Still, daily life continued, even as fear remained just beneath the surface. On a weekday in Atlanta, authorities were called to a residence where multiple people were present. What they found would raise serious questions about how protection orders are enforced and how long-term harassment can escalate despite legal intervention. You're watching Global Crime Venue, where viral fame hides chilling secrets. From TikTok dancers and Instagram couples to rising Facebook personalities, we reveal the dark side of the spotlight. When the perfect posts turn into tragedies, we break down exactly how it all unraveled. These aren't just online stories, they're real cases with real victims. And while you're here, tell us where you're watching from in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new case breakdown. In our next episode, we'll dive into another shocking story of love, control, and a hidden danger that no one saw coming. Here's the untold side of what really happened. On a weekday evening in Atlanta, Georgia, law enforcement officers responded to an emergency call, reporting a shooting inside a residential home. The location was a private residence where multiple individuals were believed to be present at the time of the call. Upon arrival, officers secured the scene and identified an adult female victim who had sustained gunshot wounds. Emergency medical personnel pronounced her dead at the scene. The victim was later identified as Cornecia Butler, a 32-year-old mother of 4. Initial findings indicated that the suspect was not an unknown intruder, but someone previously connected to Butler through a personal relationship. Investigators quickly focused their attention on Butler's former girlfriend, Shakia Perkins, who was identified as the primary suspect based on witness accounts and preliminary evidence gathered at the scene. Police reports indicated that the incident did not occur without prior contact or history between the two individuals. Authorities began reviewing past interactions, legal filings, and previous police reports connected to both Butler and Perkins. Early in the investigation, it became clear that the relationship between the victim and the suspect had formally ended months before the shooting, but contact between them had not fully ceased. Court records showed that Butler had previously sought legal protection following a series of incidents involving Perkins. A restraining order had been issued, legally prohibiting Perkins from contacting or approaching Butler. This information immediately became central to the investigation, as it raised questions about enforcement, compliance, and the circumstances under which the suspect was able to reach the victim despite the order being in place. Law enforcement officials documented that the restraining order stemmed from earlier events that included allegations of stalking, repeated unwanted contact, and property damage. One of the most significant reported incidents involved Butler's vehicle, a Mercedes-Benz, which had been set on fire approximately a year before the shooting. Investigators confirmed that this incident was connected to the same individual later accused in the homicide. Despite these prior events, Perkins was not in custody at the time of the shooting. Records show that although charges and complaints had been filed in the past, the legal process had allowed the suspect to remain free while the case proceeded through the system. This context shaped how investigators approached the homicide, treating it not as an isolated act, but as part of a longer pattern of behavior. Inside the home, officers documented the physical evidence present, including the location of the victim, signs of forced or unforced entry, and items that could establish a timeline of events leading up to the shooting. Witnesses present in or near the residence were interviewed to determine how the suspect arrived, how long she remained, and whether any verbal exchanges occurred prior to the gunfire. Authorities also confirmed that children were present in the home during or immediately surrounding the incident, a factor that would later influence the classification of charges. However, at this stage of the investigation, the focus remained on reconstructing the sequence of events rather than assigning final legal conclusions. As news of the shooting spread, friends and family members began coming forward with information about the months leading up to the incident. Their statements described a progression of behavior that had not stopped after the relationship ended. Investigators collected these accounts to compare them with documented reports and digital evidence, including phone records and social media activity. Cornecia Butler was living independently and managing the responsibilities of raising 4 children, while attempting to separate her personal life from a prior romantic relationship that had ended months earlier. Individuals familiar with her situation stated that she was focused on maintaining routine and structure for her household while limiting outside interference. Her efforts during this period were directed toward reducing contact with her former partner and avoiding further conflict. The relationship between Butler and Shakia Perkins had lasted several years before its collapse, and the separation did not result in an immediate cessation of disputes. After the breakup, Butler reportedly experienced ongoing issues that extended beyond personal disagreements, prompting her to seek formal documentation of incidents and communicate concerns to people within her support circle. These actions were taken as precautionary measures rather than as part of any public dispute. One incident that contributed to Butler's concerns involved damage to her personal property, including the burning of her vehicle. This event was later referenced by those close to her as an escalation rather than an isolated disagreement. Following this, Butler adjusted aspects of her daily routine, including limiting shared spaces and modifying how she handled communication, in an effort to reduce exposure to further incidents. During this period, Butler followed court procedures by attending required hearings and submitting necessary documentation related to her request for legal protection. There is no indication that she sought confrontation or attempted to re-establish contact after these steps were taken. Available information suggests that she relied on the legal boundaries in place while continuing with her responsibilities at home. As a parent, Butler structured her daily activities around her children's needs, including school schedules and household obligations. Family members later indicated that she made deliberate efforts to keep disputes related to her former relationship separate from her role as a caregiver. Her actions during this time reflected an attempt to preserve normalcy within her household while navigating ongoing personal concerns. Shakia Perkins became a subject of concern following a series of actions that occurred after the end of her relationship with Cornecia Butler. Individuals familiar with the situation stated that Perkins demonstrated difficulty disengaging and continued to focus her attention on Butler despite the relationship having ended. This behavior reportedly persisted over an extended period and escalated beyond ordinary post-breakup contact. One of the most significant incidents linked to Perkins involved the destruction of Butler's property. Butler's Mercedes-Benz was intentionally set on fire months before the shooting, an act that resulted in documented property damage and involvement from law enforcement. This incident marked a clear shift from personal conflict to criminal behavior and became a key reference point in later legal actions. Following that incident, Perkins was reportedly associated with continued attempts to monitor Butler's activities. Friends and acquaintances stated that Perkins maintained awareness of Butler's movements and personal life through indirect means. These actions contributed to growing concerns among those close to Butler regarding Perkins's inability to disengage. Social media activity attributed to Perkins during this period drew attention from individuals familiar with the case. While no direct threats were publicly confirmed through these posts, some messages were later viewed as indicative of unresolved fixation and ongoing preoccupation. At the time they were posted, no immediate legal action was taken based solely on that content. Legal records showed that Perkins had prior interactions with law enforcement connected to incidents involving Butler. Despite these encounters, Perkins was not held in long-term custody and remained in the community. The available records did not indicate extensive unrelated criminal history beyond incidents associated with this case. Those familiar with Perkins described a pattern of behavior that progressed in stages. Initial attempts to reassert contact reportedly shifted toward intimidation and property-related offenses, followed by continued presence in Butler's life through indirect observation. Each incident, while addressed individually, did not result in permanent separation or enforced distance. There was no public record indicating that Perkins sought intervention, counseling, or mediation following the escalation of events. Instead, the behavior reportedly continued without a clear resolution or interruption. The events in this case unfolded over several months and followed a documented progression involving legal action, prior criminal incidents, and continued contact despite court restrictions. After prior incidents were reported and recorded, court proceedings were initiated to address ongoing safety concerns. These proceedings resulted in formal legal conditions intended to limit further contact between the involved parties. Following the issuance of the restraining order, law enforcement records indicate that the order legally prohibited any direct or indirect communication, as well as physical proximity to the protected individual and her residence. Despite these conditions, subsequent reports from individuals familiar with the situation suggested that the behavior prompting the order did not fully stop. Alleged violations were noted and documented, though no immediate long-term detention followed at that time. During this same period, earlier criminal charges related to property damage were still moving through the legal system. The suspect was arrested in connection with those charges and later released on bond while awaiting further court proceedings. This release allowed the suspect to remain in the community under legal supervision, with the restraining order still active. In the weeks following the bond release, there were no publicly reported changes to the restraining order's status. No additional protective measures were announced by authorities during this time frame. Law enforcement continued to rely on standard procedures for monitoring compliance with court-imposed conditions. On the day of the incident, authorities confirmed that the suspect traveled to the victim's residence in Atlanta. The circumstances surrounding how access to the location was gained were later examined as part of the investigation. Multiple individuals were present inside the home at the time, including minors, which became relevant to later legal filings. At some point during this encounter, a firearm was discharged inside the residence. Emergency services were contacted shortly afterward. Responding officers arrived at the scene and secured the location while providing medical assistance. The victim was pronounced deceased as a result of gunshot injuries. Following the shooting, the suspect left the residence. Law enforcement initiated a search based on witness statements and available information. The suspect was later located and taken into custody without reported resistance. She was transported for questioning, and investigators began assembling a detailed timeline using physical evidence, digital records, and prior court documentation. In the hours following the arrest, prosecutors reviewed the available evidence and filed formal charges. These charges included murder, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and cruelty to children, based on the presence of minors during the incident. Court records also reference the active restraining order and prior related charges as part of the case history. Investigators continued to examine whether previous reports, bond conditions, or alleged restraining order violations played a role in the progression of events. Law enforcement also reviewed communications, location data, and surveillance material where available to establish movements and actions leading up to the shooting. Police arrived at the scene following reports of a shooting and took Perkins into custody. Officers documented the scene and collected evidence, including firearm residues, witness statements, and records of prior domestic violence incidents connected to Perkins. The primary criminal charges filed against Perkins included first-degree murder, possession of a firearm during a felony, and cruelty to children because the incident reportedly occurred in the presence of Butler's children. Perkins had previously faced multiple charges related to domestic violence, including aggravated assault, criminal damage to property, terroristic threats, and arson tied to acts such as burning Butler's vehicle. Prior to the fatal shooting, a bail bond of $70,000 had been set for Perkins on existing domestic violence charges, and bond conditions required her to maintain distance from Butler. Despite these conditions, Perkins remained free on bond at the time of the shooting. The investigation involved reviewing prior police reports, photographic and video evidence from previous incidents, and witness statements regarding the day of the murder. Prosecutors filed the charges in Fulton County Superior Court, and law enforcement coordinated with the district attorney's office to ensure the case followed legal procedures. Court records show that Perkins ultimately entered a guilty plea to the murder charge in 2025, resulting in a life sentence with the possibility of parole. As part of the plea agreement, related charges from prior domestic violence incidents were dismissed. The prosecution's case incorporated evidence from the totality of Perkins's prior actions against Butler, including the documented threats, arson, and confrontations, alongside witness accounts of the shooting itself. Court filings indicated that Perkins had retrieved a firearm shortly before the fatal incident, and that the act occurred after repeated escalations of confrontations with Butler. Law enforcement maintained custody of Perkins throughout the proceedings, and the guilty plea eliminated the need for a full jury trial. Dismissals of ancillary charges were applied because prosecuting them separately became unnecessary after the murder charge was resolved under the plea agreement. No additional pretrial motions or appeals were recorded at the time of the sentencing, and the life sentence constituted the legal resolution of the case against Perkins for the killing of Butler. The fatal shooting of Cornetia Butler had immediate and significant repercussions for her family and the surrounding community. Following the incident, friends and relatives of Butler began organizing to provide support for her 4 children, who were present in the home at the time of the shooting. Local authorities confirmed that the children were unharmed physically, but they were immediately placed under the care of extended family members, while Child Protective Services conducted assessments. Neighbors reported a heightened sense of fear in the area, noting that the incident had brought attention to the level of risk posed by domestic disputes and restraining order violations. Community members gathered in small groups to discuss safety measures, including increased surveillance and neighborhood watch initiatives, in an effort to prevent similar occurrences. Social media platforms were used by friends and family to disseminate updates regarding memorial services, legal proceedings, and support resources for the children. Local organizations that assist victims of domestic violence issued statements emphasizing the importance of legal protection measures and raising awareness about the potential consequences when restraining orders are violated. Law enforcement officials increased patrols in the neighborhood immediately following the shooting, citing concerns about potential retaliatory actions or additional threats from individuals associated with the perpetrator. Several local news outlets reported on the incident, interviewing both neighbors and community leaders about their perceptions of safety, the role of legal protections, and the responsibilities of the community to monitor escalating domestic conflicts. Butler's extended family organized meetings with legal representatives to discuss custody arrangements for her children, ensuring that all necessary legal documentation was completed promptly and accurately. Faith-based organizations in the area conducted prayer vigils and community gatherings, providing resources for grief counseling and psychological support, while local schools implemented additional support measures for students affected by the incident. The community's response included establishing temporary housing solutions for the children if needed, as well as ensuring access to mental health services to address trauma resulting from witnessing a violent event. Public forums were scheduled by city officials to address domestic violence prevention strategies, enforce restraining orders more effectively, and discuss potential changes to local policies that could improve protection for victims. Reports from social workers indicated that the children were monitored for behavioral changes and signs of stress, and counselors provided regular sessions to help them process the situation without exposing them to media coverage or outside influence. Local advocacy groups compiled data about similar incidents in the city, using Butler's case as a reference point to advocate for enhanced community support networks for at-risk families. Law enforcement agencies coordinated with child welfare services to ensure long-term oversight of the children's safety, and a multi-agency task force was assigned to review the circumstances surrounding the restraining order violation. Volunteers from neighborhood associations worked to improve communication between residents and authorities, establishing protocols for reporting suspicious or threatening activity. The cumulative efforts by family, community members, law enforcement, and advocacy groups demonstrated a coordinated approach aimed at mitigating risk for the surviving children, ensuring immediate safety, and addressing broader concerns related to domestic violence in the community. The impact of the shooting was felt across multiple levels, prompting ongoing discussions about community preparedness, victim protection, and the responsibilities of bystanders and local authorities when warning signs of domestic violence are observed. And that concludes today's case. But remember, this is just one of countless stories the world has yet to uncover. Here on Global Crime Venue, our mission is to uncover the facts, honor the victims who can no longer speak, and make sure their stories are never erased. If what you heard today made you think, know this, more cases are on the way that will shock you, haunt you, and change the way you look at social media and the world around you. Be sure to subscribe, tap the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. New investigations are released regularly, and trust me, you'll want to be here when the next story breaks. Before you leave, share your thoughts in the comments. What stood out to you most in this case? Your voice keeps these stories alive. Until we meet again, stay cautious, stay informed, and never forget, justice starts with truth. Global Crime Venue, uncovering the stories behind the screen.